Hello, and welcome to Comedians Paradise. This is where we speak to comedians, mavericks from all across the comedy world. Now, today's guest is all the way from a place where the hacker was made famous. It's a place where they often beat England in rugby. It's a place where it's probably, yeah, I mean, you guys were unlucky in the World Cup final. I thought you guys were the better teams. If you had better kickers, you would have won that final. But he's all the way from New Zealand. Please welcome to stage, and he's written for TV. He supports some of the best comedians in the world. Please welcome Nick Rado.
Hey mate, thank you so much for having me, Melvin. Yes, you've brought up a sensitive topic, which is losing in rugby down in New Zealand. But we thought we were over it until the intro, but that's
Oh,
all good.
sorry.
But thank you for having me on the show. No, it's all good. Yeah, there's still it seems as if there's always a World Cup, literally the next year. So it's we'll get it back for sure.
Yeah, I thought, I mean, South, yeah, I think, I don't know what it is, but I remember there was a period when England won the World Cup in 2003 where England were top dogs, but for the most part, it seems that rugby seems to be dominated by the Southern Hemisphere. From an outside look, okay, I mean, Ireland occasionally do well, but they didn't win when it
Hmm.
mattered. So that's the problem.
I think they call in the business chokers. And and I think we're allowed to say that because we've done it many a times. The New Zealand rugby team is always we've been the island of the Southern Hemisphere, so many a times. But yeah, no, it's big at the minute. But I think I don't think our team's that great at the minute. We're sort of in a rebuilding phase. So
Okay.
yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting.
Fingers crossed England win.
Yeah, I don't mind it to be honest. Hmm.
So apart from so how did you become a comedian, Nick? And like, tell us how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so basically, weirdly, I don't know if people know this, but I actually started in England. I started my first gig was at the Bath Comedy Cabin, which I think sadly is not no longer with us at the moment. I think COVID. You have to apologize. I have to apologize as well. I'm actually currently at the airport and I'm flying out to do some gigs in Tonga and Fiji. So if you do hear in the background some announcements, I do apologize. Not the greatest background noise for a podcast, for an audio and visual podcast, but yeah, so basically, yeah, I started in Bath and the Comedy Cabin in Bath, and I didn't know it at the time. I started it with a mate of mine called James Burley, and I'd always wanted to do stand-up comedy since I was about 14, but I didn't have enough courage to get on stage until probably like 10, 11 years later. And then I'd broken up with a girlfriend, and it was kind of this sort of moment where it's like, oh, I can do anything that I want now type situation. And I ended up with my friend James putting our names down for this what we thought was a new act night, but actually it turned out to be a competition called So You Think You're Funny, and
Ah,
we didn't realize that. And a lot of people use it tactically to enter that competition because it's such a big competition. But they might do it a year in or 2 years into their comedy career. But that was my first ever gig was the heat of the So You Think You're Funny at the Bath Comedy Cabin, and it ended up going pretty well. And but then I was like, oh well, that's it. And I remember Jeff Whiting, I think it was, called me the next day and said, hey, I got a gig for you in Exeter. And then I said, no, thank you. And then I just hung up. And then my friend at the time was like, "What are you doing? You got to go down there." I said, "Oh, I don't got no way of getting down there." And I only wanted to do comedy once, so I thought that was it. And then the friend rang up and said, "Hey, listen, we'll get him down there." And then I went down there and it was very average. It was like to 24 people on a Sunday evening in Exeter, and it was okay. It was fine. It was nothing to write home about. And then what happened after that? Oh, then I did a third gig and absolutely died. Absolutely died. Like I decided to do like 8 minutes of new material. You know, I thought I'd just write new material. Got halfway through it, and then I I remember it was at the Bath Comedy Cabin again, actually. I remember halfway through forgetting my stuff and then just going off stage early and going, I'm really sorry. I promise I'll be funnier next time, knowing in my head that there's never going to be a next time I was going to quit comedy. And then after that gig, I what happened after that gig? Oh, after that gig, I got a call to say that I'd made it through to the semi-finals of the Sweet Thank You Buddy competition. And then I was like, oh, and then it was an Edinburgh festival. And Julian Cleary, I think, was one of the judges, and Hal Crussenden was the MC. And it was, I think it was in the library room, I think was the final or semi-final or whatever. Tom Allen was in my heat or my semi-final.
Oh,
And yeah, and he ended up winning it, and I got second, I think it was. So that was bear in mind that was like my fourth or fifth ever gig was doing that. And then that year, because I was like, oh, because there was a chance that I might go through as a wild card into the final. And I remember that at the year I going, oh, it's a bit, I think I did pretty well. And the guy who was in my semi-final ended up winning the whole thing. So I felt like I should have got through to the wild card. And I had a little look, a little look at who was in the final that year. And then I was like, oh, that's the reason why I didn't make it. So in my final was Stuart. So in the final of the year that I was there was Stuart Goldsmith, Charlie Baker, Sarah Milliken, and Kevin Bridges. So I was like, okay, fair enough. Maybe they saw something in those people that were quite correct. And yeah, so ended up that being my fifth ever time. And for the first couple of years of doing stand up, I didn't really take it that seriously. It was just something that I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. I think I did like honestly, maybe 17 or 18 gigs in like 2 years. It was nothing. It was hardly anything. And then a friend, me and my couple of my mates asked me to go up to Edinburgh to do a month in Edinburgh. And I think I did 30 gigs or 33 gigs in like 29 days or something like that. And then that was it. And then I saw the improvement, but I also saw what you had to do to kind of get good at the craft. But then once that happened, I was sort of like hooked. And yeah, and then sort of work begets work, and you do a gig and you just get more gigs, and then you sort of grow that the repertoire. And yeah, and so basically that's how I started in England, and that was, gosh, 19 years ago. So I've been doing it for 19 years. So but yeah, the first, I'd say 17 years properly. The first 2 years were a bit yeah, it was just a bit of it was a fun thing to do. But yeah, so that's how I started basically.
and what got you to Oceania? So and made you the comedian you are today in New Zealand.
Well, yeah. So basically, I think it was the England. I spent 5, 6, maybe 7 years on the UK comedy circuit, and just learned the biggest thing that what I love about the UK and so I was always I guess the one thing that I would say, like a little bit of hint or a tip for new comics or new comedians out there, is kind of do the things that other comedians don't want to do. So what I mean by that is I drove to the gigs that paid £10, £20, or was an open mic that was 2, 3 hours away. I would offer to drive the headliner there and back and not ask for petrol money. I would um I would MC. MCing was like at the time no one wanted MC, especially if you're new. It was like the worst thing actually talking to the audience. But there was a time there where no one wanted to MC, and so that was the only time that you get paid stage time. And so I really embraced that. And so because I lived in Bristol at the time, and there was such a great scene. It was just when Russell Howard was popping off. John Robbins me and him took over from Russell Howard and Mark Olver's like open mic night on a Sunday. I think it was called at the Bunch of Grapes or something like that, or there was a pub in there. I can't remember what the pub was called. But we took over that on a Sunday, and we basically just hustled and did the things that no one, like other comics, were shying away from or didn't want to do. And I learned so much emceeing. I learned so much being with headliner comedians, going from Bristol down to the southwest of England and just doing those Truro gigs and the Exeters and the Newquays and all the gigs that the London comics didn't want to drive to do for 30, 40 quid. And so I would take on all those ones. I'd go over to Cardiff and Wales and go up to Birmingham and come across to London. I kind of didn't really get stuck in that London open mic circuit too much. If I did go there and did the open mic circuit, I would go in and purposely go for a weekend or a week, and I would do a run of shows, and then I'd come out and then I'd sort of do the mirth control gigs and the satellite gigs that were out in the pubs and clubs outside of England. And so from that, I basically crammed about, I would say, about 10 years worth of stage time and experience into about 6 or 7 years on the UK comedy circuit. And then when I came back to New Zealand, I was I was quite advanced in terms of how long I'd been doing it, just because of the purely the stage time and I was getting into kind of, and just the master classes that I was getting in the cars, like driving those 2 3 hour journeys with the headline comedians and tr traveling down with them was obviously like, you're talking about friendships and who they are as people. But then on the way back, you'll be like, hey, so when you did that joke or when you handled that heckler, why did you do that? Like, how did you do that? And I would just really be quite investigative with my questions. I'm probably quite annoying because they're probably just wanting to, after finishing the gig, have a little sleep in the car. But I'd say 9 times out of 10, all the comics, especially the headliners, they want to talk about the gig and they want to talk and they love talking about the craft. So yeah, so that's how I sort of got to go where I'm here in New Zealand. And then I got to write. So at the time, it was good timing actually because we we had a show here called 7 Days, which is basically like our version of Mock the Week and Never Mind the Buzzcocks and all those panel shows. We had like this one show that took all of those shows and sort of boiled it into one. And and so they needed a head writer for that. And so I wrote for that, appeared on it a few times and was the head writer for gosh, like 7 years. And that yeah, that time in the UK and that experience and writing a lot of stand up and things like that got me that gig. And then yeah, it ended up doing a lot of TV writing as well, which is great. And then in New Zealand, if you do stand up alongside some TV writing, yeah, it's a pretty good. You can sort of be a full-time comic.
Mm. Is is what's the New Zealand scene like compared to the UK scene? Is there more opportunities because it's a smaller scene? And if you're really good, you're going to get paid a lot more because there's less comics.
I would say so, yeah. So I would say you get more opportunities here. So the classic example of this is, yeah, if you're really good, you stand out. But I think it's like anywhere really. I think it's there's in the UK there's a lot more great comics, but there's also a lot more really bad comics.
Ooh.
And and so it was kind of like just the population was like, just the percentages were, there was just higher numbers. But yeah, I would agree. I would totally agree that you get sort of bigger opportunities or opportunities that potentially you might not get if I was still in England, that's for sure. Or that would be harder fought to get. Um, I think my biggest, I think the scene here is really good. Really good. I think there's some really strong stand up here. And I think that sort of because of the internet, because of you can learn a lot now, like you can study a lot of comedians and like you can watch a lot of stand up and it's you don't have to, buy the DVD or it's not behind a paywall. You can watch a lot of comedy and study the game a little bit better from afar. And I think you can be inspired by like more, different comedians and different acts and stuff. Whereas before, pre-internet, I guess it was just like you're sort of figuring it out by yourself. You're only sort of as good as your peers. But yeah, there's a really good scene here at the minute. But I think the biggest, I think the best case of getting bigger opportunities than probably I wouldn't have if I was over in England is sort of the stand-up comics that I've opened for on their world tours. So they would obviously do their world tour and then they come down to New Zealand, and sometimes New Zealand would be like a tag on to Australia. They almost treat it like, going to another state. It's like you potentially might not do like 2 or 3 weeks of a run here, but you might pop over to do one or two shows and in the main cities and things like that. But I've got to open for some pretty big comics because of my time in the UK, the TV experience that I've had. I've I've gotten on what's called galas over here, which is basically like the equivalent in America, like late night. So it's like 4, 5, 6 minute recorded TV appearances. And so I've had quite a few of those. So when you have those under your belt, people visiting go, oh, they're legit because they've been on television and they've got this experience and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's how I sort of got to open for Danny Boy when he tours down here. Russell Howard. I've been on 2 tours with him actually. He's great, and we get on. He's such a great guy, and he's we're really good friends now, and I learned so much from him watching him. He's such a hard, diligent worker, but he's also a really funny guy, but he's also very generous and giving with his knowledge as well, which I really like. But I've opened for like Nate Bargatze, who's like really one of my hero stand-up comedians, and Chelsea Handler and Rob Brydon and all those kind of people. So again, it's like work begets work. So like once you do one, it's like, oh, then they open for that person, they open for that person, and then and you just sort of get more opportunities like that. So yeah, it's a long way to say yes, you definitely get a lot more opportunities, but like anything, if you still have to deliver. So you'll get the opportunity once, but if you don't do a good job or if you're not at a certain caliber, word gets around. Let's just say that.
But with the scene as a whole in New Zealand, is it easy to double up or triple up or do lots of gigs at one time, or is it more spaced out? Because I know you can't
Yeah,
do it
it's
in
not.
Australia.
Yeah, no, I would say no. And that's purely because the population's too small to be running 2, 3, 4 clubs in a walkable slash drivable area. So me and my business partner, Tara Mahumbai, who's another fantastic stand-up in New Zealand, we run this company called Laugh Club New Zealand. And our whole ethos is to as a business is bringing like really great world-class comedians to your local. So what we mean by that is like we will go out of town, we'll go out of the major cities and go into your local town and put in a pop-up show, and we'll bring and make your local pub a stand-up comedy venue for the night and so on and so forth. But we as a business model, we don't, if there's another person doing a gig in the vicinity, we'll try to our best not put a show on in that area. And if we do put it on in the area, not to put on at the same time. And we have an absolute rule that's written down that we don't gig anywhere that's going to affect the classic, which is our one and only stand-up comedy, full-time stand-up comedy club in New Zealand. So that's kind of like we sort of hands up and step away from that. But yeah, when I first came to New Zealand, I did all the gigs that there were to do in 6 weeks. Um, and then that was a catalyst for me to then go, if I'm going to do this professionally, I'm going to need to start running gigs myself. And then so that's where international stand-up comedy gigs as a business started, and then that morphed into Laugh Club New Zealand, which is now what I do with Taryn. And now we do loads of gigs, all over New Zealand. And so I would say anyone who's wanting to come over here, you could really fill out the diary for like a good couple 3 weeks. But if you're looking to move here to like gig every night, double, triple up, then yeah, no, that's not the scene. You want to kind of go to England or yeah, or New York really to do that kind of thing.
How do you guys adjust with there not being as much stage time?
Uh, so it's tricky. So what we don't really, we just basically get what they, yeah, you just, what happens is you just start up doing your own shows and you end up, I would say, either touring or yeah, putting on shows or putting on the weekly shows or doing the open mics. There's loads of open mics that's starting up at the minute, and I don't think it's because there's a demand for it. It's just that it's more that there's like in terms of an audience, but there's more, it's just loads of comedians just trying to get that stage time, trying to build it up. I would suggest for me personally as a tip and a trick that if you are in a situation where you feel like that you're not getting enough stage time, podcasting, radio, just any kind of getting up and public speaking kind of thing, any chance you get to do it. Even like going to like I remember doing going to music open nights, open mic nights rather, and just doing my stuff at the music open mics just to get up and do some stuff. So yeah, and the scene in New Zealand is really good at the minute. It's cranking, but unfortunately in New Zealand, there's just not the population. We have like the population of like it's 5 million people here. So just to give you, Sydney has around about that, maybe 7 million, I think. So even Sydney's got about, a couple million more than us, and they're just quite concentrated in that city. And but that's our whole country has that. So we're spread out. There's only 1.5 million in Auckland. That's our most populated city. And so yeah, it's that's what it is. So mm.
What have you noticed any difference in terms of the type of humor in New Zealand compared to the UK? And is there any north-south banter in New Zealand? I know there's the things about the Jaffas and all that sort of thing, but yeah, how do you just?
It's a great question, mate. Well done. Yes, there is. There's definitely a north south, but there's definitely basically what there is that everybody hates Auckland. So Auckland is like London, basically. So everybody, if you live in Auckland, it's like living in London. Everyone hates whoever who lives in Auckland and that kind of thing. There is a bit of north and south banter in terms of like um, those North Island comedians and those South Island comedians. But unfortunately for the South Island comedians, they don't hold much weight because there's not that many gigs down there. And so it's kind of like, all right, you can, we'll let you have that little banter win because you need the stage time. So but for me personally, I have really noticed a difference because so I've decided to like about 5 or 6 years ago to go as a clean comic, and it's not because of any religious or any kind of statement or any kind of moral high ground type situation. It's purely so that I have a point of difference as a white heterosexual male with a small family because yeah, and so I've just gone that way, and so I have really noticed that in New Zealand that I'm probably one of the only few comics that are actually doing that. But I do start to notice that since I've gone this way and I've started to get more success in America and just in general, that people are sort of starting to lean that way as well, which because it's a bit of an opportunity, you get more not I wouldn't say you get more stage time, but you definitely get more of those higher paying corporate type gigs as well. So yeah, so I do have noticed a big uptrend. In New Zealand, there was a long time there where there was loads of deadpan comics coming through because of the success of Flight of the Conchords. And so there was loads of just everyone, it was almost like everyone was deadpan. And then now we're getting a lot more variety of different acts and things. One thing super interesting in New Zealand is that because it's so small and the comedians are so like this, the talent base is quite small. if someone is like, so for me, if I'm doing clean comedy, some people won't do clean comedy because they go, oh, well, that's what Nick does. And so but whereas in UK, you'll be like, oh, there's a whole bunch of surreal comics, there's a whole bunch of clowning comics, there's a whole bunch of sketch comedy and all that kind of stuff. And so there will be people that go, oh, I can't do a guitar, I can't do comedy on the guitar because that's what so and so does, or that's what Father Cockles do and stuff. It's starting to change now because now there's like more people to getting involved in the circuit. But there was a little time there where there was just everyone was just trying to find their own little pigeon hole and staying in it. But yeah, I think that's one good thing that people are, just because so and so's doing that style of comedy doesn't mean that I can't.
Mm. Is there is there any what's the banter like between like the surrounding islands? I know that Australian Kiwis have a banter with the rugby, but what's it like? Is it friendly banter, or is it like the UK and France, or is it more aggressive like Ireland and the UK?
I think personally, let's let this announcement go. But I think I think the banter in New Zealand, and this is kind of stereotypical, is I don't think there is that because there's not such a clear like in England and that kind of stuff. There's like the South and the North, and there's like different like what's almost like different. There's clearly different accents and different cultures and ways of. There's even different styles and sense of humor. Like in the North, I found that was very like on you and like aggressive and attacking, and the South was more self-deprecating. And but New Zealand's so small that we don't even have. We're just like happy to be, we're happy to be with each other. There's no real like that. Even when Australia and English comics and American comics and stuff come over, there's still we kind of welcome them. We kind of like we just like go, welcome just come over and welcome to our country. So in terms of the banter, yeah, I don't know. Like there's no real sort of like because I remember that in the UK especially, it was like you would have like the Bristol comics would and if the Manchester comics come down, you'd roll your eyes at the certain kind of styles of jokes or something, or the way that they would tell a story or whatever, and vice versa. But in New Zealand, it's like, no, I don't think we're there yet. I think we're probably about 5, 10 years away from having like a clear divide and clear banter lines drawn.
Hmm.
Mm.
And what is okay, cool. Um, what is a unique Kiwi dish that we need to know about?
Oh, okay. Kiwi dish. There's something here. Well, I guess going back to your banter situation and your divide and things like that. Australia have this very like nothing much gets under our skin too much, apart from when New Zealand and Australia claims our food. So pavlova is obviously the big, thing over here where it's basically, do you know what I mean by pavlova, right?
What is it? So,
Oh, oh. So basically it's like a meringue cake. So it's like this outer crust of a like hard marshmallow, and then and the inner part of it is like this really soft marshmallow bit, and then you put like kiwi fruit on top or some sort of fruit on top, and that's like pavlova. And there's the saying goes is that it was invented in New Zealand, but Australia claim that it was invented over there. And then so we get quite angry about that, especially when they claim anything that's not, they're not theirs. Like Crowded House is very much quintessential New Zealand, and then Australia go and claim that. The only one that we go the opposite on is Russell Crowe, where we say, no, you have him. And Australia, like, no, no, he's definitely Kiwi. And we're like, no, no, but he grew up in Australia.
yeah,
So yeah, so that's the only one we can go. We're like arguing over who we don't want it. We're kind of like the divorced parents trying to get a weekend off. No, no, it's your turn. So, but yeah, like yeah, we're pretty. I think if you come here, the quintessential dish you got to try is the hangi, which is it's basically it's food cooked in the ground, so hot stones and um meat and potato and kumara, which is like a sweet potato, cooked for 24 hours underneath the earth under hot coals, and it's beautiful. If you love like slow cooked stuff, but with a little bit of a smoky difference, it's yeah, it's you got to try it.
Mm. And what have been the what have been the weird and scary things that have happened to you in the New Zealand comedy scene that have taught you about comedy
Yeah, good
and life?
question. Yeah, good question. I think probably the worst, just whenever you have a bomb, whenever you have the worst gigs possible, like you don't really learn anything. Or I don't really learn anything from the gig going as planned or as expected or going really well. I always learn the most from the absolute deaths. And so, and every year, even 19 years in, I still have this moment where I call my wife and I'm like, what am I doing? Where are we going? What's happening? Should I just get that job at the mobile phone factory and whatever it is. But so there's a couple of stories where I learned the most. And one was when I had to do a corporate gig and they hired me to obviously do stand up. But what they did was is it was at a time where I wasn't kind of that well known in New Zealand and I was pretty young. I was like, but I had enough chops to do the gig. I was enough to get the corporate work in the first place. But they hired me to do this corporate show, and they hired a boat. And so they got like 80 or 90 of their employees on a boat. And then they got me to join on the boat. And then we went off to this island called Waiheke, which is about 40 minutes. And it's beautiful, beautiful place. And you sort of go there to, drink wine and visit the wineries and all that kind of stuff. Now, when they booked me for the show, no one knew who I was. They just assumed that I was like worked on the boat. I was the boat boy. And they were asking me like, where do I get a beer and where the toilets are and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, and if people ask you, you just go, oh yeah, it's down there, whatever like that. So I was, being obliging, but equally knowing that I have to go perform for these guys, in about an hour and a half's time when we land on the Waiheke Island. We get there, uh, there's no mic, there's no spotlight. I'm just in the corner of a room. The boss of the company goes, "Hey, I knew that you guys want to be entertained tonight, so I've got a special entertainment. But before I get the entertainment up, we just want to do a little bit of a presentation to our secretary." And the secretary, they got her up there. They gave her a bouquet of flowers, and they just sort of, as everybody knows, let's call her Karen or whatever. Karen has been going through a bit of a tough time recently, and she's been diagnosed with cancer, and she's going to be going off doing a treatment. And we just wanted to wish her well and all the best, all that kind of stuff. So another woman comes up and like puts her arm around her because she starts crying. She does a speech that everyone like is crying and they do like the standing ovation, and everyone in the business is teary-eyed or weeping or at least like really emotionally charged. Then she goes and sits down, and then they go, "Okay, now time for your entertainment. It's Nick Rado." And then they're like, the boat boy, and I was like going, "Oh no." And so I go up there. There's no mic. There's no light. There's no whatever. There's a guy called Bubba who decides just to heckle me the whole time. Doesn't let me get out a premise or a punchline. And for 40 minutes, this guy's just hammering. I die so hard. I die so hard that it was so. I still remember the feeling to this day. And but the worst part about it is that I die really hard, and then the boss guy goes, "Well, that happened," and then he goes, uh, then he goes, "Okay, the bar's still open, whatever." Then I had to sit with them because the only way to get back is on this boat. So I've got to sit with them whilst they get more and more drunker and get more and more confident about how bad my performance was. Then we all get on a boat, and then they're all on the other side of the boat. I'm just sitting there by myself. We finally get back to the mainland in Auckland. Everyone gets off, and obviously we let off the woman who's got cancer in the bouquet of flowers first. I'm standing by the exit, and she goes to me, "You ruined my night." And so I was like, "Oh, this couldn't get any worse." So for me, I learned so much from that experience. If possible, don't travel to and from the gig with the with the people. B, I was just like, I know what I would have done differently with that gig, and because of that, now I've had more experience with this. Like I always go, is there going to be a light? Is there going to be a microphone? I ask all these questions, and also as well, like I've got it up in my repertoire now that they didn't want to hear my jokes. They wanted it to be about them. And also to like that banter that I had, like I was trying to like stop him down and as like a heckler to stop him and shut him up. But actually what I should have been doing was like making the show about them and also bigging up the receptionist and also calling out the room and going, well, how am I supposed to follow that? And just call that out. And whereas before, whereas what I did was I just went on and just tried to do my jokes and go, hey, I'm from a small town. And they're like, whatever, who cares? So it's yeah, it was I learned so much from that one horrific experience that I honestly it excelled my comedic career probably about 2 years, just all the learnings I did on that one thing. And I think the reason why is because I wasn't afraid to then go tell my comedic friends who then laughed at it, which was really important because I could have got into a dark place then. I would have given up if I hadn't talked to my comedy friends. If I had talked to like my parents or siblings or even people outside of comedy, they would have just gone, why do you do that to yourself? You should get out of the game. Whereas comedians are like, oh, that's so funny. Oh, that's going to be a great story on a podcast or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I think if you're gonna die a death, make sure the first couple of people you call are like comedic friends, because then they will A, make light of it, and also B, they'll go, oh, well, that's nothing. I did this other gig and it's even worse than yours. So, yeah, I think it's important that we have that should be our lifeline call.
Mm. That is a good story. Uh, is that the worst experience you've had in comedy?
Mate, there's been so many. I've been like, I was on live television in New Zealand, talking about, uh, so I had to fill in, I had to do TV warm up, in the midst of a red nose day, kind of like telethon type thing. And, my job was to go on in between the ad breaks and then keep the crowd going and tell a few stand-up jokes and all that kind of stuff. And I remember looking side of stage at the stage manager, and the stage manager goes, uh, I like, how long have I got? And he put up 10, like he put two hands up saying 10. And I thought that meant like 10 minutes. So I thought I'd go into, I've got this 10-minute bit about my dog dying, and which is really funny. But he actually meant 10 seconds. And so I started this bit about my dog dying. I start with the dog, and then but they didn't see that. And then on live television, it just cuts to me going, anyway, yeah, so he died. And the funny thing about and then the dog's got like, like a human name, like, Barry. So the funny thing about Barry dying is, and then like everyone's going, God, get out, get out. And then I was like, I realized because like the red lights on the TV are going and stuff. And then I do that thing where when you like try and duck down and be less big, but I'm like ducking down, trying to like shimmy off the stage. But everyone can see me because it's like wide lens television. The presenters are like going, well, I don't know who that guy was, and all this kind of stuff. It was just, I don't know, it was just horrific. But Yeah, so there's loads. There's absolutely loads. But in order when I do all those gigs, I always just think to myself like, oh, it's when I turn up to a rubbish open mic or a rubbish, any gig now, and it's terrible. I genuinely go, it's not the worst gig I've ever done. So yeah, just crack on. At least you're not these people aren't dying of different diseases around you in this particular show.
For anyone that's listening right now and they're on stage and they're bombing on stage, what's
Mm.
been an example where you've been able to turn a bomb into a win? And what would be your advice for comedians that want to turn a bomb to a win on stage?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Call the elephant in the room. So actually I learned this is two ways you can do it. One I learned from John Richardson, who is a fantastic British comedian, and he was coming up in Bristol the same time as Russell Howard was coming up, and I got to travel in that car journeys that I was talking to you about. I went to him a few times with Wales and things, and we drove to this place in the arse end of Wales. Can't even remember where it is. I think it was the most southwest place you could go in Wales. It took us 4.5 hours, 5 hours of traffic to drive there from Bristol. And I went there. Oh, speaking of another bloody death. So I used to play the guitar. I used to be deadpan, play the guitar. And I remember for some reason I went to adjust the mic stand and the mic stand slipped and I cut myself quite really badly on my finger. And I ended up having to do the rest of my stuff, like jokes with a bleeding hand. It was like pools of blood on the stage. And I had to like every now and again just like suck on my finger as I was telling the jokes. And anyway, died a death again. Then John Richardson comes up, and this was in front of 7 people, by the way. We drove 5 hours to get in front of 7 people. And I died, another comic died, and John Richardson goes up and headlines, does half an hour, killed, absolutely killed. And I asked him afterwards, what was the difference? What did he do? And he said, the more, like rubbish the gig is, and the more ludicrous the situation is, go the other way and say how much you love it and how much it's been a dream of yours to perform here and call out the different things that are happening. This is great. Having a pool of blood on the stage before I go, I asked for this. This is amazing. Oh gosh, I've asked for this many times before, and other promoters don't do it, but these guys, normally it's a full house or a sellout, but but 7 people, that's my dream number. All that kind of stuff. And when a joke falls on but doesn't get the response that it normally gets, he would just say, "How good's this gig?" And I just think that for me, that's a really good tactic, a really good tip to, if you are bombing, to do it in a way where you're not beating down on the gig, but you are. People know you are, but also you're saying that you're loving it and it's going really well. And so you're saying one thing but meaning another. So that's one tip I would say. And the other thing I would say is just call out the stuff that's happening, the elephant in the room, and you'll be quite surprised how much of a release of tension that, oh, he or she's seen that as well. And oh, they think this is weird too. So just do that. And then the third thing I would say is if your jokes are bombing and your jokes are dying, try and do some crowd work. Try and make it about them. Try and try and like use that as your arsenal, just to kind of like get them on side or at least engage them in conversation so you can at least try and make your jokes work. But all in all, mate, just if you're bombing, it's fine. It's part of it. You learn more from it. It sucks in the moment, but yeah, at least you'll have that great story to tell afterwards. And again, I would just highly recommend after you bomb, call another comedian friend and just talk to them about it because honestly, they'll make you feel so much better about it.
And most importantly, you don't have to pay for the therapy.
Exactly, right? Exactly. Honestly, mate. Yeah, it's yeah. There's always one. So it's yeah. My wife and like I've got two or three comedic friends I always call straight after a bad gig.
Now, for anyone that's listening right now, how do they like find out about you?
Yeah. So Nick Rado comedian is where you can find me on all the socials or YouTube and things. You go to YouTube, Nick Rado comedian or Nick Rado comedy special or whatever. There's two free specials you can watch. I recorded them for America, so I'm currently doing some stuff in America. I've just signed a record deal with a label over there, and they're going to be producing my next album next year. So I've done in the last 2 years, I've done 2 hours. Sorry, the last 3 years I did 2 hours, and then this will be my third hour in 5 years. And then so that's coming out early next year. But yeah, there's free comedy specials there, or just Nick Rado comedian on Instagram or all the socials, and you can find us there. I'm starting to post a lot more regularly now, so finally got into the I've been dragged into the social media posting world now. So yeah, so it's good. But yeah, that's how people can get in contact.
Right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed Nick, and see you guys at next episode. Next episode is going to be with a drag artist called Lady Bushra in New York. So
Nice.
I'll see you guys later. I haven't seen the bush yet. No, I'm just sorry. I should not be saying that. That's trouble. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you guys later. I should not be saying that.